Huawei doesn't just make mobile phones, it makes it 5G and network. So it's in theory it can monitor traffic, it can disrupt a service, it can block communications, and if China pressurizes Huawei to do something, it has brass balls. Let's say it has it could cause havoc to a country if it is directed to do so. But can you tell us what keeps America up at night when it comes to China, especially Huawei?
So economic warfare today really revolves around these choke points, right? These key nodes in the global economy, because they give countries unilateral power, right? You think about the dollar, it's involved in 90% of all foreign exchange transactions. You basically can't function as a global company without access to the dollar. One country controls the dollar, it's the US, right? So the US government can say any company in China or Iran or Russia or even India is cut off from the dollar. And that's a huge amount of power, right? Well, there's been a lot of concern in the last decade that some of the new choke points in the global economy are under the control of China. Huawei is the biggest private company in China. It's a technology company that makes primarily telecommunications equipment. So when countries are building their 5G networks, which are sort of the cell phone networks and digital networks that are used in their countries, the market leader is Huawei. And when this transition was happening in 2017, 18, 19, really the first several years of Trump's presidency, the US was growing alarmed because most countries around the world, even very close US allies like the United Kingdom, were actually basing their entire telecommunications infrastructure around Huawei. Right. And so the US was really sort of floundering around in the first Trump administration, figuring out what to do about it, and eventually comes to the conclusion that the best approach is actually using economic warfare, realizing that even Huawei's equipment depends on computer chips that are designed and fabricated by US companies. And so the US sort of starts using computer chips, semiconductors, as another choke point for economic warfare to try to weaken Huawei and persuade countries around the world not to use Huawei. The campaign has been somewhat successful in that some major US allies like the UK have, got rid of Huawei's telecommunications equipment in their networks. But there are many others that haven't. The fear is that if Huawei established that kind of foothold, it would give the Chinese a weapon of economic warfare that's similar to what the US has with the dollar. And what I would also say is, it's not just Huawei and telecom gear that matters. As we saw in 2025, rare earths, it's a sector where China has 90% of the global market share of refining of rare earths. That could be a choke point too. And with the transition from fossil fuels to electrification, batteries, electric vehicles, these are areas where China really dominates. And so there's concern, I think, in the US, but also around the world. And the Indian government, I think, has been very on the ball when it comes to this threat when it comes from China.